share. First, I'd like to begin with a land acknowledgement. Sorry, my voice is really messed up. Okay. Portland, Oregon lies within the traditional homelands of the Multnomah, Oregon City, Tumwater, Watlala, and Clackamas Chinooks, and the Tualatin Kalapuya peoples who were relocated to the Grand Ronde Reservation under the Kalapuya ETC 1855 ratified treaty, also known as the Willamette Valley Treaty 1855. Today, these tribes are a part of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. The Grand Ronde people continue to maintain a connection to their ancestral homelands and maintain their traditional cultural practices. Hello, and welcome to my final presentation. I'm Veronica Taylor. I'm a first semester thesis student majoring in general fine arts and minoring in fashion. I was born and raised in the Bay Area in California. I moved to Portland in the summer of 2018 after graduating from Oakland School for the Arts. I began attending Oregon College of Arts and Crafts, but it unfortunately shut down in the spring of 2019. I then transferred schools and began attending to PNCA in the fall of 2019. And at PNCA, I dove into making work that explores my identity and my mixedness with materials that speak to the subject matter of the specific work. This is a photo of me in my first art studio back home in California that my parents made me in our little breakfast nook. Okay. For my thesis, I proposed to make a braided quilt about my ancestry that also addresses my internal struggle with being mixed. For my quilt, I will be making 6 squares about my immediate family and 7 for my maternal and paternal lineage. I thought it was important to include squares that dove into my immediate family's history, as it helps me to place myself with my ancestors and not feel so withdrawn. These are 2 past works that I've done. This is some of my older braided work that I used a bit of a different technique with that I'll dive into later. And this is a portrait, a mixed media portrait I did of my grandmother. And I chose this piece because it kind of speaks to me placing myself with my ancestors and my family. And yeah, I'm not feeling so withdrawn from where I came from. And portraiture was how I did that for a long time. This project is about ancestry, tradition, and being mixed. Hair is a huge deal to me and was growing up as well. It was something I really struggled with as a child. I looked at both sides of my family and realized I didn't look like either. This is my parents getting married. So you can kind of see the divide. But I grew up watching my maternal grandmother curl her blonde short hair every morning. And then I would watch my paternal grandmother put conditioner, oils, rollers, and a silk scarf on every night. And I was never really sure how I fit in. I saw my Black side of my family members all wearing braids and being proud of them and something that they were excited for. And it was something I feared asking for a long time. Braiding is something, I'm braiding to symbolize my internal struggle with being mixed. The subject matter is me coming to accept my ancestry and its variety. It's about realizing, loving, and showing appreciation for where I come from, especially both sides. And I think it's important to acknowledge here that I'm thankful for both sides and what they provided me with, both like research wise and just DNA wise and wisdom. And this project is just about me illustrating my love for both sides and overcoming how history has kind of pitted them against each other. I'm still working on phrasing that. Okay, now it's not letting me. Okay. One of my main influences is Bisa Butler. Butler was born in 1973 and raised in New Jersey. She graduated from Howard University as an art major. She's a fiber artist that uses quilting to celebrate Black life. Her work appealed to me at first because of her color palette and because she's quilting and the amount of detail that she was able to get into those quilts. but particularly for this project, she's one of my influences because of the way she layers her fabric and her construction of her quilts, like down here by the hand. She layers sheer fabric over to create shadows, which allow for more detail, which allow for the portraits to just become even more realistic. Um, Another one of my influences is my past work. I began braiding to symbolize my mixedness about a year ago, and since then I've fallen in love with the material. At the time, I was braiding just like strands and then hot gluing them onto cardstock. And I decided to keep my process pretty similar, like the beginning part of the process pretty similar, but the um, part where I adhere onto cardstock is quite a bit different. Okay. The article Kinship in Quilting, an examination of African American tradition, written by Florence Barnett Cash, provides a history of quilting amongst Black women and dives into the myths created around Black quilters. Cash begins by discussing the fact that there is no acknowledgement of Black women's influence and impact on the craft of quilting. There were myths that Black quilters created sloppy and technically inferior quilts for many years. In reality, Black women were the ones that made the beautiful and intricate quilts that white women took credit for. Much of what Black people had access to at the time was shaped by slavery, segregation, and systematic oppression. This ultimately created a culture based in kinship and mutual assistance. Black women carried this sense of community through after slavery into their communities. It became a large part of quilting culture as well. Maud Southwell Wallman discusses how Black art has improvised and grown throughout our history in the United States in her book, African Arts. Their contribution suggests that the unique way in which any culture encodes beauty in the seen world is an indispensable tool for coping with an indifferent or hostile reality. Looking at contemporary Black artists with this quote in mind reveals a variety of practices and traditions that have been fabricated to fit the needs of the artist. Rosie Lee Tompkins grew up quilting, but did not begin quilting seriously until the 1980s. Tompkins enjoyed keeping her family and art fame separate. Despite this, her works were deeply personal. For Tompkins' works, the Three Sixes, for example, Tompkins' work 3/6 is about her family members' birthdays that are on the 6th. I really appreciate this gift of personal information with boundaries. She redefined the tradition of quilt making to unify the subject and material while abstracting her experience for personal safety. Wallman likens it to newspaper walls. Although it may be hard to read, the meaning is there in plain view. So this is my chart for all of my squares that I'm going to do about my ancestry. Many of my squares have multiple meanings. However, the maternal and paternal side can be paired up into categories. These are the categories: place where my grandparents met, significant place where significant part of my grandparents' lives, great and great grandfather's immigration, great grandmother's passions, great grandmother's origin, something each side is known for, and something each side is proud of. Okay. Like I said before, I will be braiding. Instead of braiding and then hot gluing onto cardstock like I did in this image and this image, I will be braiding and then hand sewing onto embroidery fabric, which is down up in the upper right hand corner, and then layering sheer fabric, which isn't down in the left hand corner, to create more depth and shadow with some of my designs. The braids in particular illustrate my attempts to be one race or another. They symbolize all the little things on both sides that make me wish I was just the one. The acrylic yarn I plan on braiding with signifies the inauthenticity in that wish. It being acrylic and man-made speaks to my own experience with the tools I have available. These tools are my ancestry, and it informs my existence. Okay. Here are some questions that I'm thinking about going into my project. How can I illustrate my ancestry with accessible imagery? And how can materials be utilized to be aesthetically pleasing and have a deeper meaning? Okay. So to kind of speak on having accessible imagery, I'm thinking about, oh, I don't know why I just closed my script. I'm thinking about including my documentation, my research about my ancestry with with all of my squares. And so I'm kind of simplifying them and making them things that are easily recognizable and less specific to me, um, while also having the deeper meaning stuff displayed elsewhere. This is my Dun Smile, or the Dun Gap square. And then this is my documentation. This is my great uncle Abe and my grandma Pat sporting the Dun Gap. And this is her brother. He has the gap as well, but he's not smiling with his teeth. This is my Miami square. And this is my paternal great grandfather's petition for citizenship in 1923 from the Bahamas to Miami, which is why I did Miami. This is my avocado square, and this is my maternal great grandfather. Sorry, growing avocados on his avocado farm. Okay, these are some previous works that I've done that I think, well, this is my braiding that spoke to my mixedness and my identity and finding my place. And this work on the left speaks more to me addressing my ancestry and finding a way to place both sides in the same realm, which is something I've really struggled with. Um, this is a painting. This is my great grandfather, his house back here. This is a view from it, I'm imagining it looking across the street at my father's house, his family's first house in California. Okay. Yeah, to discuss more about my assembly, I will, after braiding each square, much like I did here, they'll be kind of complete. And then I will then braid long strands in for the borders and fill in the rest of the quilt. At this part of the assembly, I would like to address the hardships my father's side has faced because they were Black and are Black. I will be creating a red border around the squares that are and were affected by redlining, a restriction illegally imposed by them because of the color of their skin. I will also be doing borders around the squares where the white side of my family prospered because of the color of their skin. These borders will be red, white, and blue. I chose these colors because they make up the US flag. It symbolizes what my maternal side has gained through the formation and growth of this nation. The flag's colors also symbolize the traits within our country. Red is valor, blue is justice, and white is purity. I think it's interesting to consider these meanings when comparing the borders I plan to make. Making these borders will speak to social and political issues I'd like to address in an abstract way that provides me with security. Overall, well, I'd like to have all of my squares designed by the end of the semester and begin braiding and selecting the yarn, like the brand of yarn and the colors of yarn that I'd like to use over winter break. I would like to have my quilt done by the end of March, beginning of April, and then focus on making my craftsmanship is up to par. It can be moved, and begin planning my installation in further detail after that. Overall, I'd like the quilt to be 5 feet by 6 feet. As I said before, I'm interested in including an installation with my documentation. Yeah, I just like to state again that this project is about bringing both sides together and yeah, finding an appreciation for, or just documenting what I love about both sides. Any questions? Okay, done.